I seen a video by Mundane Matt about Lena Dunham. As I was listening to him talk about her, I kept thinking that name is really familiar, and then it dawned on me. I know who Lena Dunham is. She is the director and star of the movie Tiny Furniture, which I had to write a review on. God, I hated that fucking movie. Anyhow, I'm going to read the quotes from Lena Dunham's memoirs that everyone's talking about, then give my take on it, then play a clip of Mundane Matt's opinions on it, and critique his statement. I'll probably put an annotation on the screen right about now to give Matt the time code to jump to where I actually address him.
Do we all have uteruses? I asked my mother when I was 7. Yes, she told me. We're born with them, and with all our eggs, but they start out very small. And they aren't ready to make babies until we're older. I looked at my sister, now a slim, tough 1-year-old, and at her tiny belly. I imagined her eggs inside her, like the sack of spider eggs in Charlotte's Web, and her uterus, the size of a thimble. Does her vagina look like mine? I guess so, my mother said. Just smaller. One day, as I sat in our driveway in Long Island playing with blocks and buckets, my curiosity got the best of me. Grace was sitting up, babbling and smiling, and I leaned down between her legs and carefully spread open her vagina. She didn't resist, and when I saw what was inside I shrieked. My mother came running. Mama, Mama. Grace has something in there. My mother didn't bother asking why I had opened Grace's vagina. This was within the spectrum of things that I did. She just got on her knees and looked for herself. It quickly became apparent that Grace had stuffed 6 or 7 pebbles in there. My mother removed them patiently while Grace cackled, thrilled that her prank had been such a success. As she grew, I took to bribing her for her time and affection, $1 in quarters if I could do her makeup like a motorcycle chick. 3 pieces of candy if I could kiss her on the lips for 5 seconds. Whatever she wanted to watch on TV if she would just relax on me. Basically, anything a sexual predator might do to woo a small suburban girl I was trying. I shared a bed with my sister, Grace, until I was 17 years old. She was afraid to sleep alone and would begin asking me around 5 p.m. every day whether she could sleep with me. I put on a big show of saying no, taking pleasure in watching her beg and sulk, but eventually I always relented. Her sticky, muscly little body thrashed beside me every night as I read Anne Sexton, watched reruns of SNL, sometimes even as I slipped my hand into my underwear to figure some stuff out.
Okay, let's examine this. She was curious about her 1-year-old sister's vagina. Well, okay, little kids get curious about body parts. This in and of itself is not disturbing. However, I don't buy into the story that the 1-year-old Grace was able to put pebbles in her own vagina. For this to be a prank would have to be Lena using creative expression, as a 1-year-old cannot conceptualize a prank. So calling it Grace's prank was just poetic license, maybe, but the one day Lena decides to open her sister's vagina to explore it, is the one day Grace puts things in her vagina. Yeah, I think maybe Lena put the pebbles there, and she says her mother didn't question her opening her sister's vagina because it was within the spectrum of normal things she did. Okay, well look, if one of your kids is exploring their sibling's vagina or anus, and this doesn't even raise a red flag because this sort of shit is normal for the kid, you as a parent need to have that kid in therapy. And the thing is, you could still give Lena the benefit of the doubt, except the other shit. She bribed Grace with candy and quarters for affection, including 5 seconds of kissing on her lips, having her relax her body on her, and in her own words, anything a sexual predator would do, and describe masturbating next to her sister in bed. Okay, what the serious fuck? Why would this woman write in her book confessions like this and even phrases like this? You can just tell Lena is one of those girls that never got told no, never harshly criticized, just completely sheltered. Grace, who is currently a 23-year-old lesbian, has defended her sister by saying, via Twitter,
"As a queer person, I'm committed to people narrating their own experiences, determining for themselves what has and has not been harmful. Heteronormativity deems certain behaviors harmful, and others normal. The state and media are always invested in maintaining that, today, like every other day, is a good day to think about how we police the sexualities of young women, queer, and trans people."
Well, to be honest, she has a point. If these bizarre sexual acts are not believed by her to have been unpleasant or harmful in her life and sexual development, then technically it wasn't sexual predation from Lena, I guess. So on the grounds of, a thing is what I say it is when it's my experience, that is a crime is only a crime if there is a victim. As an adult, I proclaim I am not a victim, thus no crime has taken place. On that grounds, sure, Nothing predatory happened between Grace and Lena. However, here's the interesting thing. What if years from now, Grace goes to therapy for depression, anxiety, sexual hang-ups or whatever have you, and after years of being in therapy, discovers she was violated in ways that messed her head up, created repressed memories and feelings yada yada. She then comes out and says she was victimized by it, but was traumatized and in denial of the actual impact of these events. She then claims she retracts her support for her sister's behavior. Would these predatory actions performed by Lena, that are non-predatory now because 23-year-old Grace is cool with it, suddenly, retroactively become sexual predation if Grace at any point in the future, decides these actions were predatory/destructive? I don't like the way Grace tweets that we can't pass judgment, police, other people's sexual decisions. Well actually she said of young women, trans, gays, so obviously we can police the fuck out of male heterosexual behavior. She says we must not police the decisions of others. Using the word police implies asserting authority. What she is actually saying is you may not have an opinion on other people's behavior, but anyhow, this idea that a behavior is or isn't harmful, is strictly up to the participants. I'm not sure I completely believe that. This is dangerous for two reasons. 1. Consent, and harmful versus unharmful can change retroactively. 2. A person's sexual conduct is often based on social norms. Remove normality and how can any initiator/aggressor decide what is or isn't appropriate? What if a young man telling 15 different girls that she has a really pretty smile was acceptable to those 15 girls, but then knits sexual harassment to the 16th girl? And what if many of those 15 girls that allowed their hair and smile to be complimented on a daily basis by him, retroactively feel harassed, file a complaint months after the last compliment? I'm sorry, but I think some standard of normal sexuality and normal sexual conduct has to be established. At least some standard of public sexual conduct. I want you to imagine Lena's scenario playing out with two other people, only the younger sibling comes out and says yeah, now that I am an adult I am grossed out by my older sibling's weird sexual behavior and I do feel dirty and violated. Now is it okay to whip out the pitchforks and scream down with the predator? Again it comes down to the age-old joke of, sexual harassment isn't sexual advances, it's unwanted sexual advances. But how do you know it was unwanted until you tried it? Don't we need a general template of what is and isn't acceptable sexual behavior? Example, if a parent catches their two children in bed masturbating with each other, what basis does a parent have to say this is abnormal or unacceptable behavior? On the flip side, if we police the sexual behavior of others, we have oral and anal sex laws criminalizing the sexual choices made by consenting adults. So again, this is all hinging on whether or not Grace, as an adult, feels like Lena's actions were harmful. Grace says no, and according to her we haven't the right to judge the behavior in and of itself. But I say this, if you were a third party watching this, such as, you discovered a videotape of these incidents, and you were unable to contact the participants in the video, have you the right to judge the events on that film? I say you are. Now how would we judge the events on that film? Well, the LGBT would hold that because there was not a heterosexual male on that film, no crime has taken place. The events were harmless. But, if we dropped the hatred of males and straights for a moment, now how would those details be perceived? Probably as predatory. I recall watching a video by Justicar over a year ago where he was responding to someone talking about increasing vigilance against workplace harassment and bullying, and, from memory, I believe Justicar's point was, during an investigation of the allegation, there has to be evidence of the harassing and bullying. This evidence has to be recognizable by a third party. You can't have people claiming to feel harassed because they waved hi to you. The offending behavior cannot be left to subjectivity alone. There has to be some general agreed upon consensus that the offending behavior is offending behavior. At least that's my memory of his video. It's the message I came away with, and I will say that about this case, replace offending with predatory. Saying hello Grace cannot be predatory behavior if Grace feels uncomfortable by it. Likewise, if a kid pays their younger sibling for sexual favors, it does not stop being inappropriate and predatory behavior in and of itself. Look, am I a horrible bigot for saying Lena's behavior was fucking weird, downright disturbing, and predatory, regardless of whether or not her equally fucked up lesbian LGBT activist sister thinks so? And am I wrong when I say that had it been an older brother and younger sister in the scenario, even with the younger sister now an adult being cool with it, the older brother writing the book would be facing massive public scrutiny and the LGBT would be calling that shit rape, child exploitation, and feminists claiming the sister is traumatized into consenting to her abuse via patriarchy and heteronormative systemic rape culture that teaches women silence, and teaches women that it's their fault, etc. Am I wrong about that? Ultimately, Lena was a kid and so was Grace. As adults no one is claiming victimhood, so no big deal. I think it speaks volumes that Lena thought it was a great idea to publish such warped and disturbing details, and Grace agreed to have these details published. I think that speaks volumes about their family and their values, and what they in their circle perceive as normal, as if they are in such an LGBT Hollywood environment that they are oblivious to the fact these details are disturbing to normal healthy adults, or who knows, maybe the moral of the story is sexual norms are oppressive. However, in the LGBT sexual paradigm, all abnormal behavior is good unless it involves a straight male, in which case everything is rape and his consenting partners are too brainwashed by patriarchy to see it. If the LGBT dropped the axis of evil being straight cis male, their entire paradigm, and excuse to justify all manner of sexual deviance, would end. They'd have to accept what is and isn't harassing/assault/rape based on an actual value system, not just holding it to the axiom of white cis hetero male is default evil. I'll be honest. The notion of, to judge or not to judge, the sexual behavior of others is an interesting subject. I will say we haven't the right to tell people what they may or may not like doing sexually. We haven't the right to brand people as bad, or to criminalize sexual activities that fall outside the realm of normality. But at the same time, I think we have a right to at least establish normality, and within this normality, we have to establish the differences between safe and predatory behavior. Yet there is a certain truth that if two adults are consenting to something outside of this normality, we cannot criminalize them. Only a sexual victim can press charges. I do not believe someone can press charges on that person's behalf, unless that person is mentally unfit, such as a child, and such a mentally unfit person would have to have a legal guardian to qualify as unfit. This case involved a minor. But the perpetrator was a minor, and now they're both adults being cool with it. So again, trying to establish wrong and right in this situation is not easy. But I say, when all is said and done, the behavior, in the abstract, is inappropriate and predatory. The fact that her little sister grew up to be okay with this seriously fucked up behavior, just means Lena dodged a bullet, because I think most normal siblings would have grown up feeling like a victim, and called their sister a predator. And also I think it's interesting how casual her and her sister are about this crap, like their mom and dad just wouldn't find reading these details to be abnormal or inappropriate. And that leads me to wonder something. How much of what we call violating, harassing, destructive, predatory behavior, is perfectly harmless when normalized? For example, a man having sex with his 12-year-old daughter, we would call this predatory. In fact it is criminal and gets life in prison, I think. It is such a heinous crime based on the idea that this act would so deeply violate the girl. But what if there was a culture where this was normal, it was celebrated and praised as a beautiful and normal part of growing up? Would this be damaging to the child at all? Did we just transform a non-destructive act into a destructive act simply by calling it destructive? How many so-called destructive sexual acts could be made to be non-destructive simply by shifting perspective to the so-called victim by normalizing it? How many normal healthy innocent behaviors have been called destructive, manufacturing victims that otherwise would not have negative life-scarring feelings about it? I really don't know the answer. If a father has sex with his daughter starting in her pre-puberty age, and she turns 18 and says "Now I'm cool with doing daddy," are we supposed to then look at the man and say, "Oh thank God, for a moment I thought you were a nasty pedophile, but since she's cool with it, it's all cool"? Aren't there some behaviors that are just bad in the abstract, you know, objectively bad sexual conduct? Here's one last thing to think about. Lena, by publishing these details, and Grace by supporting them as harmless, are sending a message to others that wanting contact and conduct of a sexual nature from your siblings is fine. Bribing younger siblings into compliance is fine. Masturbating in bed with your younger siblings is just fine. Do you think there are any minors on Twitter getting exposed to that message from these celebrities, and then acting on feelings they previously thought were inappropriate, or deciding to not speak out, or object to this conduct in their own lives because, hey, it's normal stuff, the Dunhams did so and say so? Does publicly advocating this, by being a celebrity in the spotlight, normalize these behaviors? Does it even matter if Grace condoning her older sister's actions nullifies any criminal behavior, giving us no right to complain about the predation? Does simply publishing these details, standing by them and thus advocating, become the evil unto itself, the evil that can then be judged and damned by the public? Enough of my shallow and superficial take on things. Let's hear Mundane Matt give us some seriously deep, thought-provoking and enlightening commentary.
Suggestions of Lena Dunham like masturbating in bed with her sister and kissing her on the lips and investigating her vagina at the age of 1 year old, only to discover that there were pebbles that had entered into that vagina. That her sister apparently, at 1 year old, put it in there as a prank to scare their mom. Like, what? I read the passage and I was like, something about this seems off. And I'm not going to necessarily speculate about what I think, but I'm sure from my tone you might be able to garner what it is I'm going for here. I understand the concept of children experimenting with their bodies and sexuality. I get that completely. However, there is a point in here I'd like to kind of point out. I think part of this specific situation boils down to Lena Dunham's father. His name is Carol Dunham, and you can look him up online. In fact, you don't even have to do that. In the video description, I'm going to post the link to the Google image search for Carol Dunham's work. I would use it as a background image on this video to give you guys a better understanding, but I don't want to be flagged for the content contained within. What Carol Dunham technically, or more, I guess you say, prominently paints are photographs of large, busty Amazon women with huge gaping vaginas and lots of pubic hair. That's a lot of what it is. That's all of his art. So just imagine if you are a young girl who's coming into terms with her body and her sexuality, and she sees her father painting these large-breasted Amazonian-esque women with gigantic labias, and it's all like very, what's the word, like disproportionate, you know what I mean? Like it's not based around the human form necessarily constantly, and it's these compromising positions and these angles and everything. I could see that having a bit of an effect on the girl when she's a child. That being said, it doesn't excuse what's going on here. I mean,
so her father's Picasso-style paintings of women with disproportionate vaginas is to blame for Lena's perversion? Really now? Art did it? Blame art? Look, art makes incestuous predators, like Marilyn Manson makes school shootings, gangster rap makes inner-city gangs, and violent video games makes violent boys. When a tragedy happens, such as a school shooting or a teen suicide, we examine the situation mostly from the perspective of what was the cause. What made this happen? We do this because if we agree the incident was tragic, then we want to prevent it from happening again. Finding out what thing or things lead to the incident will give us an idea of what modifications we need to make to ensure this won't happen again, or at least reduce its future occurrence. I get that. I perfectly understand. That is why we so quickly obsess about what to blame this on. Our fear-driven and lazy culture prompts us to scapegoat bad behavior on the nearest most convenient outlet. Blaming various forms of media and entertainment is the safe and easy go-to. The other things we blame is whatever we hold to be some evil, according to our ideology. Those of us who cling steadfast to an ideology will blame all events on some opposing ideology, and that's that. Well, ideologues are gonna be ideologues. But the one thing we seriously need to do is quit scapegoating media such as music, art, literature, TV, internet, video games, especially when it is at its most inapplicable. An individual's actions, it breeds censorship. Should we ban Michelangelo's David from museum tours because a child may see David's penis and start jacking off his little brother in bed? It's amazing how much art such as David has been protested against by religious Puritans due to nudity and suggestivity. Furthermore, should we shelter our children's eyes from gays kissing in public for fear this will make them gay? Should we immediately start banning anything sexual from every aspect of our lives? Banning porn and homoerotica from every form of art, because it will mess up our kids? Most 12-year-olds by this day and age have already seen pictures and videos on the internet of probably every disgusting vile sex act. Why don't we have a massive outbreak of people having sex with their animals, raping their siblings, and performing all manner of pedo-bestiality and incest in public? Shouldn't this be the result? Isn't this fear what makes a nude magazine an 18+ item? Isn't this why Lucy and Ricky Ricardo had to have separate beds on TV and they had to refer to Lucy's pregnancy as expecting? Because allowing such sexual ideas to enter children's heads would warp and dement them, causing psychological trauma and sexual deviance. I am so glad we no longer live in such a paranoid sex-phobic culture. Though we are still a fear-driven culture, we have words like shit, fuck, ass, goddamn, cunt, titties and so on that scare us to death. We invent words and then ban and prohibit them for fear of the destruction they can cause us. Talk about nonsensical fear. We must fight the censorship, the ignorance, the bigotry, and the fear that is the heartbeat of our culture. Blaming Lena's weird incestuous behavior, and her decision to publish such details on her father's Picasso-style nude paintings, is fucking stupid. The end. I can't really say what led to her incestuous predatory behavior in childhood, but in adulthood, to look back on it, think this was acceptable, and think writing about it was cool. shows that she was raised in a really fucked up environment. I think all of her left-wing extremist politics and her feminism and LGBT activism, and others like that in her Hollywood circle, and most likely negligent mother, produced an environment where she doesn't know good from bad as an adult. Her LGBT feminism crap probably has her convinced that every act of perversion and deviance is girl power, socking it to the man, thumbing your nose at cis male heteronormativity. All perversion is sexy and subversive. Being in that disgusting Hollywood bubble is probably why she publishes the shit. But I can't really blame that on her weird behavior starting at age 7. Ultimately we don't know enough about her and her family life to know. She writes memoirs and her movie Tiny Furniture was all about her and her family. It's almost as if Lena is saying, look at me world, I'm special and interesting and important, please validate that. Her movie Tiny Furniture starred herself, her mother, her sister, and I think her friends were played by her friends. And from what I can remember about that movie, everyone was just so boring and self-absorbed and bitchy and fundamentally unlovable, and the story itself was just fucking boring, though the directing within the budget was passable. It was alright, but the story and the characters were just horrible, and I think the characters may be a reflection of their true selves. Who knows? Wow, for such a short video this thing was filled with a lot of typos. I once said minors instead of minors, you know, like a miner with a pickaxe because they're a miner. I said vaginas with an apostrophe for some reason. After I play a section back, and then record, and catch the typo during the playback of the recording, it becomes a pain in the ass to go fix that typo and re-record the section. Some typos are deliberate due to the wonky and often unpredictable speed and pronunciation that a TTS does with large blocks of texts. My audience should start playing a drinking game of take a drink every time there is a typo. Unfortunately I'd lose half my subscribers to alcohol poisoning.